Passengers on board Air Force One noted almost immediately that the door to the president's quarters remained open, in stark contrast to his predecessor's love of privacy. In office barely 10 days, Ford opened another door, this time to Vietnam-era draft evaders who were willing to perform 2 years of alternative service and pledge allegiance to the country whose military uniform they had spurned. The only thing bolder than Ford's initiative was his choice of audience before which to introduce this. You know, he could have gone to the press room and announced it. He could have found a liberal organization where he would have been cheered, but no, what does he do? He goes to the annual convention of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, meeting in Chicago. Before going on stage, he said at least he wouldn't have to worry about being interrupted too often by applause. And that was prophetic. About the same time, Ford welcomed Senator George McGovern to a White House stag dinner. McGovern, a staunch liberal and passionate critic of the Vietnam War, was frankly astonished. He said as much in reminding the president that his vocal opposition to their policies had guaranteed that neither Lyndon Johnson or Richard Nixon would ever ask him to dinner. "I know, George," said Ford. "That's why I invited you." McGovern would return the favor in 1976 by voting for Gerald Ford. By 1974, it was rare to hear a president laugh. Rarer still to hear one laugh at himself. So it was doubly refreshing when the new president joked about his unlikely ascent to the nation's highest office by claiming that even the Marine Band was a little bit confused. According to Ford, they don't know whether to play Hail to the Chief or You've Come a Long Way, Baby. Another quote from Don Penny. I can't think of a president in modern times to which anyone could say this. "Mr. President," said Penny, who was trying to coach Ford on his speaking style, "you have the ability to turn a really great joke into a statement." Anyone else would have kicked him out of the Oval Office. That Penny could speak such truth to power said more about his employer's character than any flight of manufactured eloquence. Not content to crack wise about Ford's oratorical skills, Penny also teased the president about his clothes, which he referred to as those 1948 Truman suits that he'd inherited and those electric blue leisure suits made out of, shrapnel. With Betty Ford's tacit support, Penny made an attempt to improve the presidential wardrobe and invited a Georgetown tailor, we'll call him Saul for present purposes, to come to the White House. Together with his wife, Saul had survived the hell of Auschwitz, and he was terrified by the prospect of meeting, let alone dressing, the President of the United States. Plied with reassurances, that weekend the tailor reported to the White House just as Gerald Ford sat down to watch a college football game. It wasn't easy, but Penny somehow pried Ford away from the game. Minutes passed. From an adjoining room, Penny heard the low murmur of conversation, followed by a muffled sob. Peeking in, he was surprised to observe the president putting one hand on the tailor's shoulder before the two men embraced. "What happened?" Penny asked Saul afterward. "Oh, I was fixing the president's pants, and he said to me, 'Donald told me you'd been in the camps and that you're proud to be an American.' Saul, maybe it hasn't dawned on you yet, but you're probably one of the best Americans." How Midwestern. Midwesterners are allergic to grandiosity in any form. At one hotel, the president was put up in something called the Emperor's Suite. He was not comfortable. But he was delighted when a staffer put up a cardboard sign on the front door that read, "Jerry Ford's room." When a White House steward hastened to wipe a floor soiled by the family's golden retriever Liberty, the president waved him away. "No man should have to clean up after another man's dog," he said, before tending to the mess himself. Yet that was exactly the role in which history had cast Gerald Ford. Nixon in exile haunted Washington like Banquo's ghost. At his first White House press conference on August 28th, Ford was besieged with questions about the former president, the custody of his papers and tapes, and his chances to avoid legal prosecution. The feeding frenzy confirmed a suspicion, fast hardening into certainty, that yesterday's man threatened to swamp the Ford presidency before it ever left the dock. Privately, Special Prosecutor Leon Jaworski told the White House that it could take up to 2 years before Nixon saw the inside of a courtroom, that is, assuming he could ever get a fair trial. Discussion of a possible presidential pardon led to acrimonious discussions in the Oval Office. Ford testily rejected warnings of the political consequences. "Damn it," he barked at one point, "I don't need the polls to tell me whether I'm right or wrong." "Too many decisions have been made in that room based on politics," he grumbled. This did not prevent historians or journalists, then or later, from debating his motives and methods. I once spent a memorable evening in a Grand Rapids hotel suite, wargaming the pardon with the man who issued it. I went in something of an agnostic, believing, like I think most people have come to believe, that it was a necessary thing to do, even courageous, but believing also that there had to have been a more adroit, deft way of preparing the country. And I came away from 3 hours of vigorous discussion persuaded that in the poisonous atmosphere of post-Nixon Washington, there simply was no practical means by which to prepare Americans for such a bombshell. The very first trial balloon would have been shot from the sky before it cleared the trees. Time-honored leaks designed to test the waters would have touched off tsunamis of indignation, hostility, and suspicions about a deal. It was characteristic that when faced with the most critical decision of his young presidency, Ford did not take a poll, he said a prayer. The streets around the White House were deserted when early on Sunday morning, September 8th, he slipped across Lafayette Square to take communion at St. John's Church. Returning to the Oval Office, he affixed his signature to the document immunizing his predecessor from prosecution for any Watergate-related offense. He also accepted the resignation of his White House press secretary, Gerald Ford. "He felt I had not consulted with him," Ford said later, "told him about my decision. I said that if I had told him and the press had asked him questions about it, he either had to tell them in advance, which I didn't want done, or tell a lie." It's a revealing passage. The Nixon pardon unleashed a storm of anger, reminiscent of the calls for impeachment, touched off by Harry Truman's decision to fire Douglas MacArthur a quarter century earlier. "I fired MacArthur because he wouldn't respect the authority of the president," said Truman. "I didn't fire him because he was a dumb son of a bitch." Although he was.